There was something sacred about the way Alandra Mays walked, not because she was blind, not because she was 72, but because she moved through the world with the kind of grace people wrote poems about, slow, centered, deliberate, like she heard a song no one else could. She didn't wear expensive clothes, didn't speak loudly or seek attention. She didn't need to. Her presence had weight. Every morning, before the heat of the Georgia sun coated the streets in gold, she left her small white house on Locust, street-wrapped in her faded blue cardigan, gripping the polished wooden cane that had belonged to her late husband, Solomon. He'd carved it for her by hand during his final months, each curve sanded with love, each groove etched with memory. Solomon had been a war hero, a man who understood dignity even when the world didn't offer it. That cane was more than wood. It was her balance, her shield, her history. The town of Briar Glen had always seen her, but not really. To some, she was Miss Mays, the quiet widow who hummed hymns and knew every sidewalk crack by heart. To others, she was just another old woman moving too slow. No one asked where she came from. No one knew she had a son, because she never spoke of him. It wasn't shame, it was protection. People in Briar Glen had sharp tongues and short memories. That morning, the wind was softer than usual, brushing past the pine trees like a lullaby. Elandra's steps tapped out a rhythm. 1, 2, pause. Tap, tap, turn. She passed the corner bakery that always smelled of brown sugar, smiled toward the scent of cinnamon drifting through the air, and kept walking, her cane sweeping gently ahead. She was halfway across Maple Green Park when it happened. A sudden stomp of boots behind her shattered the calm, sharp, heavy, not the shuffle of a jogger or the playful sprint of kids. This sound carried tension, intent. She slowed but didn't stop. Then came the voice, low, hard, and dripping with unwelcome authority. "Ma'am, stop right there." She turned slightly, eyebrows raised, her free hand drifting to her chest. "Is something wrong, officer?" Her voice was smooth, like Sunday morning gospel, polite, clear. Officer Troy Banning, tall, broad, a man with a badge and an ego the size of the county, stood a few feet behind her. His eyes scanned her like a problem, like clutter. "You got ID on you?" She blinked. "I'm just walking. Been walking this path for 20 years. "That wasn't what I asked," he snapped. "This park's had complaints, suspicious people hanging around." She tilted her head. "Sir? I'm blind." "You still got ears. Answer the question." Around them, silence formed a ring. People in the park slowed but didn't stop. Some glanced, then looked away. One woman pulled her dog's leash tighter and shuffled off. No one intervened. Alandra stood straighter. "I don't carry ID to go on a walk. I've lived here longer." "Then you've worn that badge." "Wrong answer." Troy stepped closer. "Let me see that stick." She pulled it back instinctively. "This isn't a stick. It's my cane." He reached out anyway. She stepped back, but his hand was faster. He grabbed the cane near its middle, yanked it with a sneer. "Just making sure it ain't something else. Please don't." Crack. It was clean, loud, violent. The cane snapped in two like it had never mattered. One half hit the grass. The other dangled in his hand, lifeless. For a second, the world stopped moving. Elandra stood frozen, her balance teetering. Her breath caught mid-throat, her knees bent slightly, her hand reaching into the invisible world she could no longer navigate. The thing that steadied her, the last gift of the man she loved, now lay in 2 pieces on the dirt. Officer Banning tossed the handle near her feet like trash. "Next time, cooperate," he muttered. "Don't make trouble where there isn't any." He walked away like it never happened. But it had. A teenager from the high school crosswalk team stood nearby, phone in hand. His fingers trembled as he stopped recording. A jogger who'd once smiled at Alandra every Tuesday tightened her ponytail and turned the other way. And still, no one spoke. No one offered a hand. Silence had become a habit in Briar Glen. Elandra lowered herself slowly, knees aching, fingers searching the ground until they found the splintered halves of her husband's cane. She cradled them in her arms like broken bones. Then quietly, she stood. Not with ease, not without pain, but with the kind of dignity Officer Banning could never understand. She walked home without help, one step at a time. Each footfall fueled, not by vision, but by memory, by pride, by something deeper. She didn't cry when she got inside. She just placed the two halves gently on the kitchen table, wrapped them in an old cotton napkin, and whispered to the silence, "Not again." And though she couldn't see it, something in that room shifted, because this time the world was watching, and her son was about to find out. Night had fallen over Briar Glen, but the air was anything but still. The sky was painted in hues of smoky violet, but behind the quiet porches and neatly trimmed hedges, something was stirring. Online. By the time the town's streetlights flickered on, Luis de Mayo, a 23-year-old barista who ran the Morning Grind coffee truck, had already uploaded the video to his small YouTube channel. He hadn't meant to make history. He just knew what he saw wasn't right. The video was short, exactly 38 seconds, but it hit like a lightning bolt. No background music, no filters, just raw footage of Officer Troy Banning snatching the cane from Elandra's hand and snapping it with no hesitation. The sound of it cracking echoed in the clip. You could see her stumble, hear the slight gasp in her breath. But the most haunting part? The silence that followed. No one helped, no one spoke. That silence screamed louder than the act itself. By 10 p.m., the video had 12,000 views. By midnight, it hit 100,000. By morning, local news anchors were calling Luis for statements, and hashtags like Justice for Elandra and Cane Crack Cop were trending nationwide. But in Chicago, 1,000 miles away, someone else was watching. Revian. Mays sat in his apartment with his shirt half unbuttoned, collarbone gleaming under soft lamplight, wine glass untouched beside him. His work brief sat open on the coffee table, filled with notes on a corporate discrimination case he was scheduled to argue in D.C. that week. He wasn't watching the news. He was watching the video again, and again, and again. Each time it played, his jaw clenched tighter. His chest rose and fell like a tide he was trying not to drown in. He didn't just recognize the woman in the clip. She was the ghost in every courtroom victory he ever had. The reason he'd studied law. The reason he left Georgia. The reason he stayed silent when his last name opened doors. He hadn't spoken to his mother in almost 2 years. Not because he didn't love her, but because loving her meant remembering everything he hated about Briar Glen. The stares, the muttered slurs, the polite racism behind every smile. And it meant facing the guilt that he had escaped while she stayed behind, unprotected. Now there she was, her cane, his father's cane, broken, her dignity shattered. And still, she stood. Revian turned off the screen. He walked over to the window and stared into the city, chest heavy. "Rev?" a voice called behind him. Soft, feminine, filled with concern. Najia stood in the doorway of the bedroom, wearing his t-shirt, her dark curls damp from the shower. Her eyes searched his face. "What's going on?" He didn't speak at first. Just walked to her, pulling her close. His lips pressed to her forehead, then her temple, then her mouth. Not with lust, but something deeper. A kind of desperation. As if anchoring himself. "She's not just another victim," he whispered, voice thick. "Who?" He looked down into her eyes and said, "That's my mother." Najia froze. She'd known Revian's past was complicated. She'd heard pieces, about a town that chewed up black families and spat them out, about a mother he respected but never visited, but she'd never seen this expression on his face before. not even in court. It was a blend of fury, heartbreak, and something far colder. "What are you going to do?" she asked gently. Revian's grip tightened. "I'm going home." Elandra didn't know about the video yet. She hadn't turned on the TV. Her phone had been silent all night. She'd sat at the kitchen table for hours, her fingers tracing, the linen napkin wrapped around the pieces of the cane. In that quiet, she replayed every second of the morning, not in fear, but in calculation. This wasn't her first brush with injustice, but it might be the first time the world cared. Luis hadn't slept. He watched the numbers rise on the video like fire spreading across dry leaves. He didn't want fame. He wanted accountability. He paced back and forth in his apartment, heart pounding, wondering if he should have posted it at all. Then just past 2 a.m., he got a message from a name he didn't recognize. Rev May's Law. "You don't know me, but I know her. Thank you. Please send me the original footage." Luis stared at the screen, then typed back, "Who are you?" Rev May's Law. "Her son." Luis's throat tightened. He sent the file. By morning, Briar Glen had changed. Local police cars patrolled slower. The mayor's office phone rang non-stop. Officer Troy Banning had stopped showing up at the station, and outside Elandra's house, reporters had started gathering, unsure of what they were waiting for. But the town was about to find out. Her son was coming home, and this time, he wasn't coming quietly. The train of silence that had followed Elandra Mays for years came to a halt the moment Revian's black SUV rolled into Briar Glen. The town hadn't seen him since his late 20s, when he'd left to study constitutional law and never looked back. Now, he stepped out under the sharp Georgia morning sun, tailored in a navy blue suit, briefcase in hand, jawline tight with purpose. His eyes, often calm and measured in the courtroom, were now unreadable, like storm clouds just before. Lightning. He stood in front of the same White House he grew up in, the porch unchanged, the wind chimes still tinkling by the door. He hadn't walked these steps in years, not since his father's funeral. The smell of pine, biscuits, and thyme hit him all at once. But it was the broken cane, carefully displayed behind the kitchen window like a museum artifact, that punched the air from his lungs. He opened the door with his old key. Inside, the house was quiet. The wallpaper had peeled slightly near the ceiling. The same cross hung above the kitchen doorway. And sitting in her worn-out wooden chair near the window, shawl wrapped tight around her frail shoulders, was Elandra. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. "I felt you before you stepped on the porch," she said softly. Revian dropped his briefcase near the door and stepped inside. "You always said I walked too heavy." "That's not why." Her voice trembled. "I felt it in my chest, like Solomon was sending you home." He knelt in front of her, carefully taking her hand. Her fingers were colder than he remembered. "You should have called me, Ma." She gave a weak smile. "I wasn't sure you'd want to come." His jaw tightened. "You're my mother. I left town, not you." "And I let you," she whispered. "I let you go so you could build a life without carrying the weight of this place." His throat thickened. "That weight just caught up with me." Silence stretched between them. For the first time in years, they weren't attorney and widow. They were just mother and son, sitting in a room too small for the hurt they both carried. After a while, she asked, "You saw it?" He nodded. "The world saw it." She flinched slightly. "I didn't ask for attention," she said. "I just wanted to walk. And now I want to make sure you can do that without fear. Without someone breaking your spirit every time they see your skin before your name." She turned her face slightly toward him. "Your father would have loved that. He would have hated that cane breaking more than anything." Her lips curled upward. "That cane was his pride. He made it for me when I lost my sight. Said it would keep me safe when he no longer could." Revian exhaled sharply. "And That man, that officer crushed it like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing, she said, a slight fire flickering in her voice. It was the last part of Solomon that still moved through this town. Revian stood, shoulders square. Then we're going to make sure they feel the weight of what they broke. Later that night, Revian and Najia sat in their hotel room just outside of town. She lit a single candle and moved closer to him on the bed. Her touch was gentle, sliding her fingers along his wrist. "You okay?" she asked. "No," he answered truthfully. "But I'm focused." "You were quiet all evening." He looked at her. "Being back here, it pulls something out of me I thought I'd buried. Every memory, every whispered name, every hand on my shoulder pretending to care while their eyes dismissed me." Najia leaned in, brushing her lips gently against his jaw. "You're not that boy anymore." "No, but my mother's still that woman." He pulled her into him, holding her as if the weight of the town could be chased off her skin. Their bodies connected not in fire but in warmth, slow and aching. Lust mixed with grief, the kind that made you cling a little tighter, kiss a little slower. Afterward, Najia whispered into the dark, "You're going to burn down everything they built to keep her quiet." Revian closed his eyes. "I'm going to make them remember her name, and mine." The next morning, the Briar Glen Community Center buzzed with reporters, murmurs, and tension. Nobody had seen Revian yet, but word had spread that the woman in the video had a son, and he was a federal civil rights attorney. At precisely 10 hours a.m., the doors opened. Revian walked to the podium alone. His voice was calm but piercing. "My name is Revian Mays. Some of you may remember me, but more importantly, you all know my mother. You saw what they did to her. You watched it." He held up a clear plastic evidence bag, the broken cane inside, its edges jagged like open wounds. "This is not just wood. It's a story. It's sacrifice. It's silence that's ended today." The crowd leaned in. "Tomorrow we file a federal complaint. Today we start something bigger, because when you break a woman like Elandra Mays, you don't just break a cane, you break the lie that this town can stay quiet forever." And in that moment, the son they never knew became the voice they would never forget. The air in Briar Glen Courthouse was thick with unease. The old wooden benches creaked beneath the weight of whispers, and every eye was fixed on the long, narrow table where Officer Troy Banning sat, stiff-backed, jaw tight, fingers laced together in forced composure. Across from him, in a tailored black suit with no visible badge, no notes, and no fear, sat Revian Mays. He didn't come to perform. He came to finish what had started the moment a cane had been snapped in two. The Civilian Oversight Committee, rarely more than a formality in Briar Glen, was now center stage. The town had never seen so many reporters, so many people standing in the hallway unable to fit inside. Outside, crowds gathered with signs that read, "Respect her steps." Blind, not silent. That cane carried history. But the loudest voice was inside the courtroom, and it didn't come from shouting, it came from truth. Revian stood and addressed the board directly. "My name is Revian Mays. My mother, Elandra Mays, walked this town's streets every morning for decades without incident. She was blind, not lost. She was elderly, not weak. And she was humiliated in public by a man who wore a badge but forgot what it meant." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out the clear plastic bag containing the broken cane. "You see, this? It's not just evidence. It's legacy. My father carved this for her when she lost her sight. He passed before I graduated law school, but he told me one thing I never forgot. If they touch your mother, you show them whose name they..." "Bruised." Murmurs rippled across the room. Troy's lawyer shifted, stood, and tried to reframe the situation. Officer Banning was conducting a safety check. He believed the object was a threat. There was no clear indication of disability. Revian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You're telling me that a white cane held by a 72-year-old black woman wearing sunglasses and moving cautiously didn't register as a mobility aid? He turned to the committee. Let's be honest. If she were white, blonde, and carrying a guide dog, we wouldn't be in this room. He wouldn't have touched her. You know it. I know it. And the people watching from their phones in 5 states know it too. The board chair, a former district judge, looked squarely at Officer Banning. You are seen in the video removing the cane without consent and breaking it. Do you deny that occurred? Troy's throat bobbed. It wasn't intentional. Revian stepped forward. She stumbled, Officer Banning. My blind mother stumbled, and you walked away like she was trash on your windshield. The courtroom fell silent. From the second row, Elandra sat poised in a gray dress and pearl earrings. She held her new cane, a gift from her church ladies. Firm in her hand, the initials EM engraved in silver. Her eyes, though blind, seemed to burn straight ahead. The committee recessed after 2 hours of testimony. When they returned, the board chair didn't waste time. We, the Civilian Oversight Committee of Briar Glen, hereby recommend the immediate suspension of Officer Troy Banning and formally refer the case to the State Attorney's Office for criminal review. A stunned hush, then applause. Gentle at first, then a rising wave of claps, cheers, and hands over hearts. Someone in the back shouted, "Say her name!" and the crowd answered, "Elandra!" Outside the courthouse, Revian stepped onto the stone steps, flanked by his mother and Najia, who had silently supported every move. Reporters swarmed with mics and questions, but Revian raised his hand and said only this: "This is not vengeance. This is correction. And we're not done yet." The following week, the town of Briar Glen did something it had never done before. They honored Elandra Mays while she was still alive. In the park where her cane had been snapped, a new metal bench was installed under the large magnolia tree. It gleamed in the sun, with a bronze plaque that read, "In honor of Elandra Mays, for walking with dignity when the world looked away." When Elandra was led to it, she touched the metal letters with trembling fingers. Around her stood pastors, school teachers, students, shopkeepers, even those who had once walked past her in silence. Revian watched from the side, emotion heavy in his chest. Najia slid her hand into his. "You did it," she whispered. He shook his head. "She did. I just helped the world see her." Elandra turned her face toward them and smiled. "I didn't want to become a symbol," she said softly. "But if this helps someone else stand taller, then let them sit here. Let them remember we don't break easy." She sat on the bench. Slowly, cane resting beside her like a scepter, and Briar Glen stood still, not out of fear, but out of respect, because this time they saw her, really saw her.